One alone in the old cabin, the wind howled through the cracks in the wooden walls, rattling the fragile shutters like a warning. Snow had begun to fall outside, covering the rugged land in a blanket of icy silence. And inside, the cabin smelled of damp wood, burning logs, and quiet despair. She had lived here for months, maybe years. It was hard to keep track of time, when loneliness had a grip so tight it made the days blur together. Her hands were rough from chopping wood, her face weathered from nights spent huddled under a thin quilt, staring at the shadows that danced across the uneven floorboards. Survival had become routine, but hope had long been a stranger. That was the day she never expected a cowboy like him to appear. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wild West Tale, because some stories remind us that the heart can heal, even in the loneliest corners of the world. She had been struggling to make ends meet ever since the world had turned its back on her. The cabin had once belonged to her family, a place filled with laughter and warmth, now reduced to memories that clung to the dust in the corners. Her pantry was nearly empty, and she rationed food like precious treasure, forcing herself to go without so she could keep a small pot simmering for dinner. The wind outside made the old roof groan, and she often felt the fear that it might collapse under the weight of snow. Nights were worse. The darkness felt alive, pressing against her chest, whispering that she was forgotten, unworthy, invisible. Every sound made her flinch: the howl of a wolf, the crack of ice beneath the trees, the distant rumble of a storm. It was during one of these bone-chilling nights, when the fire had burned low and her body ached from exhaustion, that she heard the sound of hooves crunching through the snow. Her heart stopped. Visitors were rare. Most people avoided the stretch of land she called home, dismissing it as barren and cursed. She thought of running, hiding in the shadows, but something told her to stay. The knocking was gentle at first, almost tentative, like someone unsure if they should disturb the solitude she had grown accustomed to. When she finally opened the door, there he was, a man mounted on a tall, chestnut horse dusted in snow, his hat tipped low against the biting wind. His coat was worn but expensive-looking, and the way he carried himself told her he had not wandered these woods by accident. His eyes, sharp and kind, met hers with a calm that made her forget for a moment the harshness of the world outside. She hesitated, unsure if this was real, unsure if trust was even an option anymore. But before she could say anything, he dismounted, brushing snow off his shoulders, and walked toward her with a slow, deliberate grace. The firelight caught the edges of his rugged face, revealing a smile that was gentle, reassuring, yet firm. He didn't speak at first, letting her study him, letting her gauge if he was friend or threat. Then finally he said nothing more than, "I saw your cabin. Thought you might need some help." The offer startled her. People didn't come here to help. People came here for reasons she didn't want to imagine: curiosity, exploitation, or profit. But the sincerity in his voice, the careful way he didn't enter uninvited, made her lower the door. He carried a bundle of supplies: fresh bread, preserved meat, blankets, and firewood, things she had not seen in months. Her hands shook as she accepted them, disbelief written across her face. It wasn't just the material help that stunned her. It was the recognition of her struggle, the acknowledgement that she existed, that she mattered. Over the next few days, he stayed nearby, helping her repair the cabin's roof, chopping wood faster than she ever could, and sharing stories of the world beyond the snow-laden forest. He spoke sparingly of himself, revealing just enough to paint a picture of a man who had lived hard and learned. Kindness in the same measure. She watched him work, his presence a quiet force that made the cold cabin feel warmer, the long nights less frightening. Slowly, she found herself laughing again, a soft, tentative sound that startled her more than anyone else. Despite the comfort, fear lingered. She had been alone so long that the idea of letting someone in, trusting someone with her life, seemed almost impossible. But he was patient, never pressing, always leaving her space while remaining close enough to offer safety. There were moments when he would step away to tend to his horse or scout the perimeter, and she would realize she had grown dependent on the sound of his footsteps, the sight of his shadow, the warmth of his gaze. It was a strange, uncomfortable feeling, hope. and with hope came fear of loss. One evening, a storm swept through the valley, fiercer than any she had endured before. Snow piled high against the door. Wind rattled the windows like desperate fingers, and she realized she had underestimated the danger. The fire sputtered and died, and for a terrifying moment, she thought of freezing, alone with no one to help. Then, through the howl of the wind, she saw his silhouette at the edge of the cabin. He had braved the storm, returning with more wood, a lantern, and a steady determination that defied the blizzard. He worked quickly, his hands skilled and sure, and within moments the fire roared back to life, warmth spilling over the cabin like a blessing. She realized then that his arrival was no coincidence. He had chosen to be there, chosen to fight for her when she had almost given up on herself. In the days that followed, their bond deepened, not through grand gestures, but through small, quiet moments that spoke louder than words. She learned to trust again, and in that trust, she found courage. The cabin, once a symbol of isolation and despair, became a sanctuary filled with laughter, conversation, and the simple comfort of shared silence. The snow outside no longer felt like a threat. It was a reminder that the world, harsh as it could be, still held beauty and kindness. He never asked for anything in return, never demanded that she repay him. Instead, he stayed, watching her reclaim her life, helping her rebuild what had been lost. And she realized that sometimes the most profound change comes not from our own efforts alone, but from the unexpected hands that reach out when we are too weary to lift ourselves. His presence taught her that kindness could heal wounds, deeper than any she had imagined. That second chances were real, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. As the first warm rays of spring broke through the snow, she looked at the man who had changed everything. He didn't need words. She knew that he had saved more than just her body from the cold. He had saved her spirit, her hope, and her belief in the goodness of people. And in that realization, she understood that the world could be harsh, but it could also be miraculous, if only we allowed ourselves to accept the miracles when they arrived. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share this video. And if you've ever believed in the power of a kind soul, hit subscribe to Wild West Tale to see more stories that restore faith in humanity. Before the story ends, take a moment to comment below and share the kindest thing someone has ever done for you. Your words might inspire someone who needs hope today. In the end, she wasn't alone anymore. The old cabin, once filled with shadows of despair, now echoed with warmth, laughter, and the steady rhythm of a life renewed. She had survived the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness. But more importantly, she had discovered that sometimes the right person at the right time could change everything. And as the cowboy stood by the door, watching her smile in the sunlight streaming through the windows, it was clear that both of their lives had been transformed by a simple act of courage, kindness, and the willingness to show up when it mattered most.